Okay. So again, I'm going to start a new composition. I'm going to add a couple titles, and then we'll animate both of them, and we'll look at some different uh, types of animation we can do besides position. So I'm going to make a new composition, and I'm going to call this credits. Credits are some info that shows up at the end of an animation or a film that gives credit to the people who worked on it. So usually the director, writer, animator, multiple animators in most cases. And then it also will give credit to like music, any licensing, any other stuff like that. Let's set the frame rate to 24, and I'll stick with 10 seconds. We probably won't use all of it, but let's stick with that. And I'll say okay. And then I realized last time the reason my text wasn't centering right was because I should have gone to layer and just new text instead of using the text tool. So the text tool is when you add a text to an existing layer or a shape layer that you want to also have text. But if we want just text, we should just use the text layer. All right, so let's add some credits. So we'll put the name of the animation again. I'm going to make this a bit smaller. And then I'll put by, or I'll say animation by Owen, written by Owen, directed. You can, put whatever you want. I'll just say animation by Owen Roberts, whatever you want to put here. In this case, since we have basically like a paragraph, I'm also gonna, let's make the stroke a little smaller since we have smaller type. And we can left align this. That'll look a little bit more normal. And then we can, oops. Be careful about how you get out of the type area. So I'm going to go select this because I hit escape and that got rid of all my type. Or actually I hit V on the keyboard to get my selection tool, but then that just did a V instead of actually getting the V. Anyway, so here's our first title. And then after, so I'll show this, first, and then we can also play with the paragraph a little bit. So if I want to increase the line height, I can do that with this guy here. So if I want a little more space in between those lines, I can just increase that value there. This does the same thing. What is this? This is after and before. Okay. So let's just do after. I can also, move the whole thing in or out. And if I have like a indent, I can do that there. But this looks good. Maybe I'll do 48 to match the text size. And so then we could go to like 4 seconds or something like that. And if I change the type here, what you'll see is that the text source actually changes. So if I get the type tool and I go here and I write, or actually, let's make sure, there we go. Okay, sound by, and let's say blah blah, we don't know who the sound is yet, so I'll put something in here just to remind me to add something else. Or yeah, we could say sound by blah blah, music by blah blah blah, whatever it is that we're going to use. But notice I overwrote my previous type, so I don't want to do that. So what I can do is I can actually do a source text keyframe. And that's obviously going to be a hold keyframe. So that's just a square, because it's not going to smoothly transition from one text to the next, because there's no way to really do that. But now if I replace this with sound by blah blah and music by blah blah blah, notice that now there's a new keyframe here. So I can actually go from one text to the next. So I can have one layer with multiple titles on it. So you might not want to do it that way. You can just make new layers. But this way, we can keep everything on a nice little layer. You could also just, as I mentioned, make a new layer and just edit them wherever you want them. That text source keyframe will also save like color and font information. So if for some reason you wanted this one to have a different font, I'd have to select the text first, but I could change the font to something else and it will save that info. So it'll go between those different fonts. So any information like the paragraph or anything else, any of these properties, you can save as a keyframe so that you can keep your text on one layer. This is going to make it a little trickier to animate, but we're just going to have to copy and paste our keyframes. So let's do that. Okay, so let's make another cool effect here. So this time, instead of animating the position, I'm going to animate the opacity. And we'll see that the same, we can apply some of the same effects to the opacity that we did to the position. There's also rotation. There's also, if we click on this little animate button, you can see there's all sorts of different transform properties that we can animate. We can animate the fill color, we can animate stroke width, all of these different properties we can animate. I'm going to go with opacity as another example. And I'm just going to animate the opacity from 0 to 100. So I'm going to keyframe at the beginning and do 0. And then I'm going to go to like 1 second, somewhere around there. And I'll change the opacity to 100, and that'll add a little keyframe. So notice we get the fade in here, but then we have this other keyframe here. So anything I do over here, I'm going to want to repeat over here. But let's do that later. Let's set up our animation first, and then we'll copy and paste. Okay, so we've got this nice little fade in, but can we make that more interesting using our range selector? So just like we did with our position, I'll make this a little bit bigger and go to our range selector. And notice again, if I play with the end or the offset, we're going to change where this applies. But let's see if we can. So let's animate our offset. So I'm going to start with the offset at -100. And I'm going to keyframe that. And then I'm going to go over here. And I'm going to go to 100 and keyframe that. And so now we get this like little thing where it's fading through the text. So actually let's move these over a little bit so we can see this a little more clearly. So now the opacity is animating, but this offset is also animating. So we can see the opacity only applies to the part of the offset that's being animated. So that's kind of fun. We see that offset changing there, and then everything, it ends up at full opacity by the end. So we can do that. This is still by percentage, but remember we can change the units. So if I change the units to index, now it's going to go by character. Okay, so now it looks pretty much the same, but it's going by character instead of percentage-wise. But now if I say based on, and I do words, now we get each word coming in and out. And that's going a little bit too fast. Oh, did I change this by mistake? Let's turn that off for a second and just... I think I screwed up the opacity keyframe at some point. Oh, no, okay, yeah. Okay, let's set the offset to 0. And end... Oh, end is 38. That's right, because that's how many... No, okay. Oh, okay. This is actually... So, I think what happened is when I set this to characters, the end is 38, but when I switch it to words, it should be... How many words are there? There's only like 4. Because it should be animating word by word now, and it's not doing that. So let's try... let's switch this back to a percentage. Okay. And then, let's see. Let's try going back to index. There we go. So now... Okay, but it's still only animating. Okay. So let's try... Maybe we'll just animate... Let's try animating just the end, so we can isolate that. There we go. Okay. Oh no, it's not quite right. So yeah, it's a little tricky using these. Maybe we want to start at 6. There we go. Okay. And then go to 0. No, that's not it. Okay, let's just delete these. Okay, we're still getting the whole thing. Okay, try to offset again. So let's go from -6 to 6. Okay, maybe I just want to go from 0 to 6. Okay, that's a little bit better, but we're seeing the opacity happens a little bit too quickly. So let's drag these guys out a little bit. Okay, that's not exactly what I want, but let's keep playing around with it. We'll figure it out. So with the opacity, we can still add all the other effects that we were looking at with the position. So let's go. We can also do it based on lines, which is going to do the 2 lines separately. So if I do by word, it brings in each word. If I do it by line, it's going to bring in each line. And then we still have the shape. The shape isn't going to be as clear because we don't have, like, since we're not using position, it's not all laid out in a row. But we still have the shape, and that will affect the rate of the animation. So let's go back to words for a second, and let's try a ramp up. It's a little bit too fast to see that. Let's try ramp down. Yeah, so you can kind of see that there. And then we have the same ease and ease high and ease low. And then we can randomize as well. So we get random values as we animate in. Let's see if I set this to -6. That's not what I want. Okay, let's turn the offset off. Maybe I want to start... Okay, if I do end 0, I just get that. Let's try start at 0. I feel like I'm missing something obvious, but for some reason it's not giving me what I want. Let's turn off random for a second. Okay, so maybe if it seems like it's doing what I want, but it's not fully. Maybe if I just make this longer. Okay. Anyway, let's switch this to lines. So that looks good. And then what we have to do is repeat this when we get to the second part. So we could grab this keyframe here, and I'm just going to hit Control-C to copy, and then paste it up here. And then do the same thing with this one. I just click on that keyframe, Control-C, copy, and move up here, and Control-C, paste. And so now we get our first title or credit, and then our second title or credit. Okay. So that's another example. Again, we can do all the same stuff. We can add the wiggle. If we add in the wiggle here, we'll get kind of, hopefully, like a cool sort of flickering effect, which is kind of fun. So you can get the same type of effects, but this is with a different property than with our, let's do words for this one. So instead of just the position, now we're using the opacity. So you can play around with other properties, rotation, anything else that you can animate. You can add these effects to. And so now we have some credits. So let's go back to our final composition and throw this in there as well. So I'm going to go to final. And so we have our title and then our main section. And at the end, we're going to have some credits. So we can put this here. And then we're going to have to make our composition longer. So I'll click on Final, Composition Settings, and I'll make this like 20 seconds. And we can always shorten it later. And I'll just throw this at the end. So now we have our little title sequence. We have our walk cycle. And then we have our credits. And if we want to have a little fade out from the walk cycle, we can do that as well. So let's keyframe our opacity here and then fade it out. Okay, so there we go. We could also move this over a little bit. And this title sequence is probably longer than it needs to be, but that's just for the demo. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to stop the recording here, but then I'll go over exporting and posting as usual. So let's do that.